Thanks for being willing to explore how to activate your potential. Introducing Potentiation Electromagnetic Repatterning, the human bioenergy blueprint. Muscle testing, properly utilized, can be a powerful tool for gathering and evaluating information that has been validated in numerous studies. My partner Lee assisted me throughout the development of Potentiation and the Regenetics Method. We performed literally tens of thousands of tests with clients who had come to us suffering from various chronic ailments. At the time, years ago, we were offering a form of energetic allergy elimination derived from Nambudripad's allergy elimination technique and an offshoot of NAET called Bioset. One of our most important realizations about traditional allergy clearings was that these techniques employ typically Western focus on the physical, even though the techniques themselves use pure energy. In light of this internal contradiction, we became interested in the body's bioenergy fields. These fields, which, collectively, have been called the aura, can be thought of as an interlocking set of high-frequency, force fields, each responsible for the correct functioning of a particular gland, organ, emotion, etc. The bioenergy fields, combined with the system of chakras, form the human bioenergy blueprint that can be envisioned as a hologram of intersecting horizontal and vertical lines of force. Many researchers have confirmed the existence of the human bioenergy fields. Kirlian photography has captured these fields for decades. In the 1980s, Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama developed instrumentation capable of measuring bioluminescence such as light emitted by the chakras of yoga masters. The late Valerie Hunt, a professor at UCLA and author of Infinite Mind, employed an encephalograph (EEG) machine to register the bioenergy blueprint. Dr. Hunt went so far as to theorize that the mind, rather than residing in the brain, actually exists in the bioenergy fields, and that in some as yet poorly understood way, the latter may be the mind. The alchemical science of the Kabbalah calls the bioenergy blueprint the nefesh, often described as a lustrous bubble encircling the body. One reason Western science has ignored the bioenergy blueprint is that, because of its extremely high torsion frequency bands, it is difficult to quantify. Our bioenergy blueprint functions as a compendium of all the data pertinent to our well-being. In the holographic universe, Michael Talbot explains that because an illness can appear in the energy field weeks and even months before it appears in the body, many believe that disease originates in the energy field. This suggests that the field is in some way more primary than the physical body. Naturopath Stephen Lindstedt explains that an interruption or distortion in the range, strength and coherency of the body's electromagnetic system leads to breakdown in the body's self-healing mechanisms. Physician Richard Gerber goes a step further by arguing that if doctors could find a way to treat the bioenergy field, they would achieve total healing. Until then, Dr. Gerber contends, many treatments will not be permanent because we have not altered the basic blueprint. Similarly, Natalia Dobrova describes the individual as a complex emotional bioenergy information system, a microcosm that reflects a macrocosm, the universe. All of a person's organs and systems have their own electromagnetic rhythms. Disharmony in this rhythmic activity signifies disease. Dr. Dobrova explains how such an imbalance is closely connected with structural or functional problems found in a person's organs or systems. If one can restore the person's own rhythmic harmonies to a sick organ, one can restore the proper functions of that organ. A nearly identical line of thinking informs one of the classics in the field of sound healing, Jonathan Goldman's Healing Sounds. Through harmonic resonance, writes Goldman, it is possible to restore the natural vibratory frequencies of an object that may be out of tune or harmony. When an organ or another portion of the body is vibrating out of tune, we call this disease. Such belief in the power of sound to heal the body is echoed by Leonard Horowitz, whose research in cymatics, the study of the effects of sound on physical form, leads him to emphasize that harmonic frequencies maintain health, promote growth and healing, while discordant frequencies produce stress, oxygen deprivation, acidification, electrochemical imbalances, illness and death. From a cymatic or vibratory standpoint, disharmony is disease. The critical concept here is that all manifestations of disease, whether physiological or psychological, result from distortion, via toxicity or trauma, or both, of the primary bioenergetic harmonies contained in the bioenergy fields and corresponding chakras. These bioenergy centers have an intimate relationship with DNA that gives them direct regulatory access to all cellular functions. Therefore, if we can reset our bioenergy blueprint through harmonic resonance, we can go directly to the root of disease processes. Mapping the bioenergy blueprint. Having spent nearly a decade suffering from an illness with many similarities to chronic fatigue, multiple chemical sensitivity and fibromyalgia, I am deeply grateful for the pioneering work of Nambudripad and Cutler, without whom I do not know where, or even, if, I would be today. Their inspiring techniques served as an indispensable springboard for the development of the Regenetics Method. But here I must point out two major blind spots with traditional allergy clearings, at least as vehicles for resetting the bioenergy blueprint. The first oversight, to reiterate, is a focus on physical issues without fully acknowledging their origins in our bioenergy blueprint. The second problem is that the nervous system, used in traditional allergy clearings, simply cannot process all the torsion frequencies encoded like radio waves in our bioenergetic structure so as to transform a damaged blueprint. The same shortcoming applies to most energetic modalities, such as Reiki and radionics, which function at the comparatively surface level of the nervous system, as opposed to through DNA. Another way of stating this is that the majority of energetic therapies are light-based, lacking the genetically transformational aspect of sound. Compared to sound, light is superficial. Light is thought, form; sound is being, essence. Light diagnoses; sound restores. Light treats; sound heals. Light is concerned with information, whereas sound is about transformation. Contrary to the conservative paradigm that insists healing must happen one baby step at a time, my experience suggests that chronic illness in particular requires a radical, simultaneous bioenergy reset. One that can be accomplished by using the primary energy of sound to activate DNA. DNA is named an acid, but it is technically a salt, sodium. Sodium is a critical human electrolyte and an excellent conductor of energy. It is hardly surprising many researchers have determined that DNA regulates the body's electromagnetics. Through extensive kinesiological research, Lee and I identified more than 3,000 energy signatures over the body-mind-spirit continuum of the human bioenergy blueprint. A traditional allergy clearing of this size would far exceed the capacity of the healthiest nervous system. But when properly activated by sound, the superconductor that is DNA is designed to reharmonize the entire bioenergy blueprint. One of my inspirations was a prominent figure in the field of radionics, chiropractor and author David Tansley, who provided some of the foundation for my notions about the bioenergy fields. Following Dr. Tansley's lead, and supported by the quantum science's holographic view of the body, I began to understand the bioenergy fields as an integral aspect of our existential template, the blueprint for our physical form. My theory was that when mapped, this blueprint would reveal itself as a series of ecosystems, where a number of interdependent factors work either harmoniously to create vitality or disharmoniously to produce disease. The approach Lee and I took to map the bioenergy blueprint was straightforward. Using kinesiology, we began muscle testing to establish which elements, genetic, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, etc., were governed by which bioenergy fields. We discovered an amazing poetic symmetry, a sacred geometry of almost breathtaking beauty in the way the fields are organized and work in concert. We spent 6 months developing our ideas in South America, where we performed the first DNA activation in the Regenetics Method, Potentiation, on ourselves that restored my physical well-being and took care of Lee's asthma and environmental allergies. Then we began offering Potentiation to others, many of whom have reported remarkable results as evidenced by our numerous testimonials. In order to complete our work on Potentiation, however, we first had to set aside what we had been taught about DNA, that it is merely a biochemical protein assembly code, and understand DNA's vitally reciprocal relationship with the bioenergy blueprint. Only then were we in a position to explore avenues for stimulating the human genome's extraordinary self-healing potential. Resetting the bioenergy blueprint via DNA. After mapping the bioenergy blueprint, we realized we had to find a way to press its reset button. It was at this stage we began to understand that the nervous system was never meant to repattern the human bioenergy blueprint. That only sound-activated DNA can permanently restore bioenergetic harmony. And that therefore, some other method of initiating repatterning besides stimulation of the nervous system had to be found. We went to DNA because it was the obvious choice. DNA contains our genetic codes and is the master blueprint for our biology. It literally creates us through a protein assembly process known as transcription. To transcribe is to copy in writing, to produce in written form, or to arrange music for a different instrument. In other words, we come into being, at our molecular level, through a process with striking affinities to composition. It is extremely interesting to consider the privileged place of song, storytelling and words in creation myths. Anyone who has undertaken a comparative study of religions probably has been struck by the universal role of sound and language in such myths. Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 relates, "And God said, Let there be light, and there was light." In the New Testament, John states, "In the beginning was the Word," an idea paralleled in the Vedas where we read, "In the beginning was Brahman with whom was the Word." The ancient Egyptians similarly believed that the god-men Thoth and Ra created life through language, just as the Mayan tradition insists that the first humans were brought into existence by speech. Consistent with this language-based cosmology, the healing tradition immortalized in Finland's Bok saga is based on memorization and utterance of sacred sounds. This saga, which Dr. Horowitz describes at length, is an elaboration of a time-honored oral technology employing sound and light based on a spiritual understanding of how to work with nature orally or naturally. Here, in ancient mythology, writes Horowitz, is the relationship between Genesis, genetics, and the spoken word. Also implied is the concept of holistic health hinging on oral functions. Horowitz points out that neurophysiologists have determined that fully 1/3 of the sensory motor cortex of the brain is devoted to the tongue, oral cavity, the lips, and speech. In other words, oral frequency emissions, i.e., bioacoustic tones, spoken or sung, exert powerful control over life, vibrating genes that influence total well-being and even evolution of the species. Since the start of the Human Genome Project, there has been a tendency even in mainstream science to regard DNA as the alphabet through which we are written into existence. Another metaphor helpful in understanding genetic composition also derives from language. DNA's alphabet is composed of 4 basic letters, nucleobases, that combine to form 64 different words, nucleotides, used to build a virtually limitless number of sentences, genes. Lee and I realized that if we were to activate what we saw as an extraordinary latent potential in DNA, one perhaps capable of transforming both consciousness and physiology, we intuited along with a growing number of researchers. We had to find or develop a way to access DNA without laboratories or test tubes. But how do you activate DNA without physically manipulating it? At this stage, we were fortunate to be given a copy of The Cosmic Serpent, DNA and the Origins of Knowledge, by French anthropologist Jeremy Narby. Dr. Narby spent years studying the healing techniques of shamans in the Amazon. His riveting account was particularly helpful in developing the Regenetics Method. In one telling passage, Narby writes, "DNA is not merely an informational molecule, but also a form of text and therefore is best understood by analytical ways of thinking commonly applied to other forms of text. For example, books. This way of looking at DNA as a book made sense. Narby clearly says we can learn to read DNA. By implication, he suggests we can learn to write or rewrite the genetic code. An alternative way to conceptualize what I am calling rewriting is to imagine that DNA contains a subtext resembling a series of footnotes that can be scrolled up on screen. In this scenario, no rewriting or reprogramming is required. The program for our new and improved bioenergy blueprint already exists in what mainstream genetics has dismissed as junk DNA. Most geneticists have admitted they have little idea why over 90% of our DNA even exists. The majority of DNA appears to be nonsense. A lot of it is in the form of palindromes, puzzling sentences that can be read the same forward and backward. Junk DNA consists primarily of introns, considered non-coding genetic sequences, as opposed to exons that have an identifiable coding function in building our protein structures through RNA transcription. In other words, exons clearly do something, while introns supposedly do not. Fortunately, some who have asked how nature could be so inefficient are beginning to rethink this dogma that ultimately raises more questions than it answers. Recent research has shed light on intense epigenetic as well as metagenetic activity in junk DNA, which appears to have much more to do with creating a specific species than previously thought. For example, if we only look at the small portion of DNA composed of exons, perhaps you have heard there is little difference, genetically speaking, between a human being and a fruit fly. There is also practically nothing at the level of exons that distinguishes one human being from another. Others who have studied the mystery of junk DNA have concluded that the as little as 3% of the human genome thought to be behind protein transcription does not contain enough information to assemble any kind of body. Faced with this mystifying scenario, more and more scientists are paying attention to curious structures called jumping DNA, or transposons, found in the supposedly useless 97% of the DNA molecule. In 1983, Barbara McClintock was awarded the Nobel Prize for discovering transposons. She and fellow biologists coined the term jumping DNA, for good reason, notes David Wilcock, as these 1 million different proteins can break loose from one area, move to another area, and thereby rewrite the DNA code. Clearly, junk DNA was prematurely dismissed. In an article titled The Unseen Genome, published in Scientific American, Dr. John Mattick is quoted as saying that the failure to recognize the importance of introns, to say nothing of transposons, in junk DNA, may well go down as one of the biggest mistakes in the history of molecular biology. Lee and I propose that we rename junk DNA potential DNA and understand it as our energetic interface with the bioenergy blueprint. It is accurate to say that DNA is a form of text with its own alphabet, and that we can use linguistic means to rewrite DNA. In the process, activating an energetic reset program, designed to turn our introns into exons, via transposons, and create new protein transcription sequences capable of leading to regeneration. Potentiation employs particular combinations of vowel-based sounds paired with linguistic thought, like codes that are transmitted to the recipient's potential DNA, initiating a domino effect of repatterning that resets the bioenergy blueprint to harmonic functioning. Here, I am coming from a perspective that views light and thought as equivalent energies. The new physics, as well, explains that the act of thinking produces electrical currents that generate torsion waves of light, much as audible sound waves produce torsion waves of sound. Potentiation safely and permanently stimulates DNA without fundamentally altering the individual's basic genetics by simply activating a reset potential that already exists. The session, a one-time event, takes just 30 minutes. The resultant shifts surface in the weeks and months following as the bioenergy blueprint repatterns. For some, these shifts are felt dramatically, for others they flow into a subtle upswing. The entire process takes just over 9 months, 42 weeks, to complete. Interestingly, a human gestation cycle. Learn how to potentiate yourself. Read the beloved sound healing classic. Join us the first Sunday of each month. Become a Regenetics facilitator. Please help share the good word. Learn more at phoenixregenetics.org.